You thought you knew the horrors of war. The German engineers could anticipate everything. You were wrong. In 1941, a storm of fire hit their positions, so intense soldiers lost their minds and broke into panic. No one expected ordinary trucks carrying a secret machine to turn a battlefield into hell. The launcher was simple but brilliant. Behind its creation were engineering tricks so cunning the enemy racked their brains trying to copy them and failed completely. The Germans called it primitive until they saw it tear everything to pieces with their own eyes. We'll show how ordinary screw presses, propellant powder, and the boldness of Soviet engineers produced a weapon the Germans couldn't reproduce even with all the blueprints. How one small secret changed battles and left the enemy stunned. You'll learn the truth about why the Katyusha was not just a weapon, but a psychological nightmare for its opponents, and what fatal mistakes the enemy made when they tried to imitate it.
In 1941, the German army marched across Soviet soil, confident in its invincibility. Columns of tanks, mechanized divisions, endless ranks of vehicles, all of it was supposed to sweep away any defense. Then, one day, something appeared in their path that no one in the Reich had even heard of. At dawn, when the air still smelled of the night smoke, a roar descended on German positions. Not a single shot, not an artillery salvo, a long, keening wail, as if the sky itself had begun to scream. Within seconds, dozens of fiery trails appeared on the horizon, and in a blink, the ground was torn by an inferno of fire. The Germans encountered the Katyusha for the first time. This launcher didn't resemble any other weapon of its time. A rocket barrage system, simple in design, monstrously effective. It didn't strike with surgical precision, but it struck with mass. Each rocket carried not only explosives, but a psychological blow. When dozens of flaming streaks come at you at once, a soldier's hands shake and faith in machines dissolves into smoke. Most important, nobody in Germany knew the USSR had such a weapon. Intelligence was silent. Secrecy was so tight that many Soviet units themselves saw the Katyusha in action for the first time on the battlefield. Command understood how vital it was to hide its construction, and orders were clear. No launcher must fall into enemy hands.
But the front seldom follows orders. In the chaos of retreats and under air attack, a few vehicles did end up in enemy hands. The Germans took them apart bolt by bolt, measured and photographed every piece. Soon their engineers hit an unexpected dead end. Everything was clear, except for one thing. The Katyusha's warhead used ballistite propellant, and its power depended on special propellant sticks that had an even central channel. There were 7 sticks in the rocket chamber, 6 around the circumference and 1 in the center. Simple geometry, but an incredibly tricky technology. The Germans quickly concluded, to make such elements, you needed equipment of colossal force. By their estimates, pressing those long, dense cylinders required a hydraulic press rated in the hundreds of tons, a machine that existed only in England, a giant mammoth press, as tall as a 4-story building. In wartime, Germany couldn't afford anything like that. Their logic pointed one way. If the Russians had managed it, there must be a similar giant press hidden somewhere. They couldn't believe such sticks could be formed without a powerful industrial monster.
So they reached a wrong conclusion. The Russians had made a crude system with low accuracy and short range, and copying it wasn't worth the effort.
But the truth was far more ingenious. Soviet engineers took a path the Germans would never have imagined. Instead of bulky hydraulic presses, they started with ordinary screw presses, the very ones used in food factories for making pasta. It sounds absurd, a machine that shapes dough turned into a tool for military manufacture. Yet that step became a brilliant breakthrough. Engineers strengthened the frame, added a heated jacket, beefed up the gearboxes, and managed to extrude a continuous, perfectly uniform gut of ballistite with a straight central channel. They cooled it, then cut it into pieces of the required length, and those became the propellant sticks at the heart of the rocket motor. Production ran continuously. The machine could only be stopped for about 10 minutes at most. Otherwise, heat would start to break down the mass. Any interruption risked catastrophe. So the line ran like clockwork, continuous, rhythmic, under the hum of metal and the smell of hot nitro powder. Out of scarcity and under tight deadlines, a weapon that changed the psychology of war was born.
But one technique alone wouldn't suffice. Ballistite propellant had another dangerous trait. When heated, it became viscous and began to decompose. In Western countries, they stabilized it with an additive called centralite, a petroleum-derived chemical. Without it, producing large sticks was impossible. The mixture would simply fall apart in pressing. The USSR didn't produce centralite. Imports stopped and stocks ran out. Katyusha production faced collapse. Then, in a secret NKVD laboratory guarded around the clock, a team led by Professor Alexander Bakayev found a solution. They replaced the scarce additive with magnesium oxide, a common, cheap powder. It stabilized the compound nearly as well as the original and allowed production to continue without interruption. That decision saved the program. Without it, the Katyusha might have remained an experiment on paper. But thanks to inventiveness, flexibility, and the engineers' persistence, production never stopped. Meanwhile, Germany kept trying to build an analog. The Wehrmacht engineers assembled their own rocket system, the 6-barrel mortar Nebelwerfer. Soldiers nicknamed it Vanusha, or the donkey. It made a strange wailing noise, like an animal's roar. The weapon impressed, but technically it was far inferior to the Soviet launcher.
Its range was almost half as much, its charges were weaker, and the black powder used instead of ballistite left a thick smoke trail that instantly revealed the firing position. After every salvo, the crew had to move or face return fire from Soviet artillery. Ironically, even the later rocket grenade systems, such as the Faustpatrone, used the same smoky powder. The Germans never replicated ballistite technology with the required stability and power. Their industry, despite discipline and organization, ran up against a simple, insurmountable wall: the lack of necessary components and flexible solutions. The Soviet Katyusha marched on the fronts. It became the symbol of offensives and counterattacks. Its barrages were heard for tens of kilometers. When a battery opened fire, the ground trembled, the air was cut by whistles, and the horizon flashed orange-yellow. Afterwards, enemy positions were left with craters, wreckage, and scorched earth. But even stronger than the physical destruction was the psychological effect. Soldiers who survived a Katyusha volley remembered losing orientation in the first seconds, not knowing where to hide. What remained in memory was less the sound and more the sense of an ending, as if everything around burned at once. That's why the Germans called it Stalin's organ, for sounds like organ pipes and for how it played across the battlefields.
This crude, simple, brilliant machine embodied everything that defined Soviet military engineering then: lack of resources, inventiveness, stubbornness, and the ability to get results by any means. The Germans could copy drawings, but they could not copy the environment that gave rise to the idea. Where a costly press was required, Soviet engineers used a pasta screw. Where a stabilizer was missing, they added magnesium oxide. Where equipment didn't exist, they built something new out of what was at hand. That is why the copy never surpassed the original. The Katyusha remained a symbol of bold engineering, born not from abundance, but from necessity. By the war's end, its salvos were an integral part of Soviet artillery preparation. It opened the way for tanks, infantry, and assault guns. Its arrival on a position meant one thing: in a few minutes an infernal rain of fire would begin. There were no more secrets to the Katyusha, yet no one ever managed to reproduce it, because its power lay not only in powder or metal. It lay in the people who, lacking resources, made the impossible. In those who turned ordinary factories into furnaces, and kitchen principles into the basis of rocket weapons. And perhaps that is the real secret. Not formulas or propellant composition, not blueprints, but the ability to find solutions where there seems to be nothing left but will and fire.